Good morning. It is good to see you all. My wife and I are so excited to be here finally. We're still driving back and forth between here and Cersei, and it's a lot of time on the road, but it's also a lot of time of thinking about this whole process. It is an exciting time of the year for me and my family, but also for us because tomorrow is going to be a Labor Day picnic, and everybody's excited about that. Yesterday, I saw some men who were sweating like pigs, but it was a good one because I love the picture of the elders and the men and deacons in trying to, make this a good thing. They were sweating. Some of them got some cuts on their legs. But also exciting in that some are ready for a new start of their lives. And this is a new start for me and my family. So what we will do here in a few minutes is talk about my family and also talk about the lesson. Next Sunday, we will talk about the power that power chains. The power that power chains. And then the Sunday after that, the third Sunday of September, will be about this powerful revelation from Mark. A good parable that we all need to hear. And it's something that we need to be reminded of, especially today, where we in our focus and other things, and we forget about this powerful thing that we need to be reminded every day. The Christian world needs to hear it. So before we proceed, I would like us to pause for a minute and pray. God, we are so blessed that you love us, that you have called us your sons and your daughters. We are part of your family. As we talk about family this morning, pray that you are pleased, that you are happy, that we can gather together despite of our differences, the struggles that we face every day. God, I pray that as we struggle together as a family, not only this biological family, but also the church family, that you will be with us as we move forward towards growth and change. Bless our time. I pray this in your Son's name. Amen. So I'll talk a little bit about my family and then put an exclamation point and a period, a bow on the previous 3 lessons that Mark shared to us. And those were 3 beautiful lessons. I love the first Sunday when he addressed the young people and he asked these kids and teens to be prayed over. I think that was very, very neat. And I love the video of the husband carrying the wives, and almost like that was actually to me a parable where the wives were almost talking to the behind. It's almost like the daily struggle of the wives where you talk to your husband, but your husband is turning away. There's probably some of you that can relate. I think I can relate to that. And then I love the video of, the women, the wives calling their husbands. And who would thought that the oldest woman would win the first prize. But those are good imagery about teens, about husbands, about wives. Here's some quotes about family. This is just something to keep our heads, in line with our topic today and to process a bit. It said, the first one said, you don't choose your family. They are God's gift to you as you are to them. The second one says, call it a clan, call it a network, call it a tribe, call it a family. Whatever you call it, whatever you name it, whoever you are, you need one. My wife and I met through her parents. Actually, I was one of those young ministers in Cebu, and this whole thing is just a beautiful story of how God, set everything in place. But I grew up in a Christian family, and my mom is a college professor. And when I graduated high school, I didn't want to go anywhere. I just wanted to hang out in the house and with my friends and be like a regular teenager. But my mom pushed me, and she took me to the city and enrolled me, and she wanted me to do computer science because she had this vision that there was back in the 1990s. I'm that old, yes. She thought that 10 years from now, technology would overtake this normal way of life. And true indeed, we have iPhone, iPads now, and almost everything can be connected through technology. And so I went, but I was not happy with that because my mind was just hang out with friends, house, hometown. That's all I wanted to do. And so I was very rebellious in this decision, despite of, being in college and be surrounded by young adults. I was so rebellious that I found myself doing some stupid stuff, which I will not disclose here for the sake of your, sanity. But I was doing this, I was doing this stupid stuff, and so I was wasting money, my parents' money, which when I look back, I feel so bad about it. But I was wasting my mom's money. And so in my third year, junior year in college, I went to one of these youth camps. And then one of the preachers preached this long sermon like most Filipinos would preach for an hour probably, and you would be snoring by then. So I sat there, and he said this one thing. He talked about many stuff, many good points, but I could not remember those points. But I remember one thing. His question was this, and it appeared to me that he was preaching to me only. He said, "What are you going to do with your life?" And for 3 years, first year in college, second year, and third year, I was struggling with my identity because I didn't want to be in college. And I was struggling with my morality. And that question hit me so hard. I was like, yeah, what are you going to do with your life? And so I went back home and I said, "Hi, Mom, I want to go to a Bible seminary." And they were like, "Bible seminary?" And you would thought that they would be so supportive of you because they wanted you to dream. And now that I have found my dream, I have found my purpose, you would think that they would, okay, go ahead. But they were so hesitant by that. They actually said the thing that I said before. He said, "There's no money in ministry. There's no money in ministry." Now, I understand that that's out of their love of me because they wanted me to do better than what they had experienced in the past, where they had to work 24 hours, almost 24 hours a day just to supply, food for the family. I understand that, and I love that part of them. So I went to the seminary without their permission and without their approval. And after 4 years of being in the seminary, by the way, that's where I met my in-laws, my future in-laws, Mark and Devi Van Dyke. And they took us as their kids and their sons, and we would spend a couple of days on their house. And I love that part because that's where I feel this relationship with other Christians. But after I graduated from that Bible seminary, I went home and served my home congregation for 3 years as their youth minister, their pulpit minister, their gardener, their cleaner, all of the above. And it was a lot of work. It was a good experience. But I realized that part of me was more about me than God. And so I did some stupid mistakes again, and then I sought the refuge of the Van Dykes. I said, "Hey, can I come home? And can I stay there for a couple of months while I recuperate from this struggle, from this pain, from this brokenness?" And they accepted me with loving arms, unknown to them that I will be married to their daughter in the future. So they accepted me, and then I started this congregation through their help as well. Founded a congregation in Naga. We started from 7. The first Sunday it was just me, and I remember my mom, my future mother-in-law. It was just a small crowd. And that would put pressure on me for the next 7 months, that they would just be a small number of Christians. But that turned out to be a good struggle, because after a couple of years, that church grew from 7 to 150. And then one summer, while I was teaching these kids right here you see in this picture, this is by next to a river, and this tree right here is a huge acacia tree. But one summer, when Andrea, my wife, visited Philippines, she noticed that I was teaching. She was told by her parents that I was teaching this bunch of kids here, and we didn't have tables, we didn't have crayons, we didn't have materials. And so she handed me personally these boxes of crayons and these papers and all the stuff you need to teach kids. And I was so moved by this generosity that I personally and verbally told her, "Thank you for this," but it seemed like it was not enough for me to just verbally say that. So I sent her another note, and then another note again on social media, and that escalated to dating secretly while I was using my in-laws' internet. So we were dating secretly while I was using my in-laws' internet. But 2 months before we got married, we started a ministry called Hope for Tomorrow. It's a ministry that ministers to the marginalized kids of Naga. And it's a great one because I saw God use that ministry to bless not only the church members, but also these kids. These kids right now can tell you how much God has blessed them because of Hope for Tomorrow. And the neat thing about this whole thing is that there is no doubt that God is behind this whole story, that He has orchestrated this whole thing. I can look back and easily point to you. Back then, I would not see God. I was just, I'm so blessed that I'm so handsome that I met this daughter of Mark and Debbie. But if that was not the case now, I would look back and say, well, you are not qualified for her, really. This is all God's work here. This is God orchestrating this whole thing. So I can look back and tell you that this really was God orchestrating this whole story. So my story and Andrew's story is not just my story. It is God's story of redemption. It is God's story of grace. It is God's story of purpose and identity. And He has enveloped this whole thing so that I can share it to you this morning. And as we shift to our topic this morning, I would like us to shift our attention to this vase. Sometimes when we look at other families and we, ponder on their stories on that certain family, we look at them and see like, wow, that's a beautiful family. That's a cute family. I love that family. And we could not help but wish. I wish that my family was that family. I wish that my husband was that husband. I wish that my wife was that wife. I wish that my kids were those kids. I wish that they were my kids. We could not help but compare our family with their family. And that's good. That's good if we use that as our guide to better our family. But if you use that, if you compare their family to your family and use that to put burden on your family, that's not healthy. Because what you don't know is that every family that looks beautiful on the outside has their own struggles. My family and I, if you just based on judging, if you just judge us based on the story that I shared to you, you would look at us as a beautiful, beautiful vase, a beautiful family. But inside, if you look closer, there's tensions, there's struggles. I'm not saying that our family is broken. I'm just saying that there's cracks in there. And cracks are not necessarily bad. And as we weigh on that, we realize that every family is really not that family. Every family is this family. Tensions. The husband and wife does not see eye to eye every day. The parents and the kids are not on the same page every day. And that's fine. That's okay. I think what is important for us to realize is this phrase right here that says, and this is the cause of tension, family is unique gift that needs to be appreciated and treasured, even when they make you mad. This is the cause of tension, even when they interrupt you, even when they annoy you, try to control you. These are the people who know you the best and love you. These things are present in every family. Sometimes you're in the middle of watching this Netflix, I don't know what kind of movie, but then your sister comes in and gets the remote, grabs the remote from you and changes it. Sometimes you're in the middle of praying and then the kid starts on crying and yelling and fighting over, over something. And sometimes the wife wants to be beautiful, but the husband has no way of expressing how beautiful the wife is. And so the wife is frustrated that the husband could not appreciate her beauty. These are tensions, and tensions, don't mistake tensions as a dysfunction. Tension, this is our first point this morning. Tension is not a dysfunction. Do not equate tension for dysfunction. Tension is actually beautiful. I go to Barney's Gym. I call it Barney's Gym, the Planet Fitness, because of the color purple, like Barney. But you use the tension, you lift weights so that the tension in your muscle can grow. And whenever you expose the tension in your muscle, I don't know how many goes to gym here, but it grows over time because of the tension there. So tension is beautiful. However, when tension is left unchecked, it can become a dysfunction. So tension itself is not a dysfunction, but when it's left unchecked, it can become a dysfunction. Tension is not a dysfunction. But how do you deal with tension in the family? And I'm not saying the verbal abuses and the physical abuses, that's a different level. That's a different story. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the small nudges, the small push, the interruptions, the small fights over small things. Ephesians chapter 4 tells us about how to deal the tensions in the family. Verse 26, it said, in your anger, do not sin. Is there not anger in your family? Anger is present. Anger is present because there's something that you wish to be done, but it's not fulfilled. So there's anger. And sometimes, you're frustrated at work and you come home and somehow between your work and your house, you were not able to vent out that anger, so it goes to your family, to your kids. When you pick up your kids, you thought it was your boss. But it was not your boss. So there's anger. Now, Christians are not people who are drained of emotions. We still have emotions. We get sad, mad, we get angry. And so Paul recognizes this, but he said, yes, you can get angry, but when you get angry, don't sin. How do you do this? He said, don't let the sun go down in your anger. Settle it. Settle it. Have peace. Have peace over it. And the second thing that he said is, do not allow unwholesome talk come out from your mouth. Especially, when you notice that your wife is struggling over something, and then you don't say a negative word if you notice that your wife doesn't look, pretty that time. Just don't. The other thing that we need to recognize is when your husband is focused on doing something and he wants to get done, sometimes husbands get into this, I think generally just the men, when they get into this stuff of doing something, that they'd rather skip meal just to get things done. So when they get into this, this world of theirs, don't interrupt them and probably encourage them. That looks so great. Continue doing. You might, but anyway. The other thing is, verse 29, it said, only say what builds up. Only say what builds up. If you want to say something to your husband or to your wife or to your kids, say something that builds up. I love this about parents. Parents love to tell good stories to their kids, even when they're not true. One of the things that I've learned from my mom is that growing up, I thought I was not, I didn't look good. I was not handsome, but my mom would say, you're the most handsome boy in the whole wide world. I was like, really? And it made me feel so good that I was handsome. And I think this is what Paul said here in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. Say something good to your spouse, to your kids, because they need it. When they go out of, when they get out of your houses, they will not find positive words. There are bullies out there. Those kids of yours, 5 years old, 7 years old, they get bullied. Over what? Over something that's not really true. So say positive words to your kids. Tell them how handsome they are, how beautiful they are, how smart they are. Because as they continue to process that, they will start to believe that. And this is what happens with kids that don't have, a good solid structure in their houses. When they go out, what they listen to is the voices outside. And they believe those voices that they're nothing, that they're nobody, that they're useless, that they're not handsome. So you have here a beautiful household that is filled with Christian families, Christian morals, and you need to say good things to your kids. The other thing that Paul said is, get rid of all bitterness. Unfortunately, when we become adults, we have our own ideas, and we start to be our own person. And somehow our parents tried to control us because they thought that we were still, the 5-year-old, even though we're the 35 years old. And sometimes when they try to tell us something, there becomes a tension, a conflict. And sometimes those conflicts are not resolved. And it's okay if it's not resolved right away. But what Paul tells us is to get rid of all bitterness. Bitterness is that unresolved anger, unresolved relationship, unresolved communication or miscommunication. It needs to be dealt. Probably not right now, probably in the next month or so or the next year, but it needs to be resolved. Probably if you are the dad, you need to step in the situation and say sorry, even though it was not your fault. The next thing that we need to remember is that your family is part of God's story. Your family is part of God's story. The first one is tension. It's not a dysfunction. Every family has tensions. That's okay. That's fine. The second thing that we need to remember this week is that your family is part of God's story. And why do I say this? I say this because Ephesians chapter 5 is full of good things from Paul. He said whenever he would say something, he would connect it with the phrase, in the Lord. Here in Ephesians chapter 5, by the way, there are 4 household codes in the New Testament. It's in Colossians, Ephesians, Titus, and also 1 Peter. But Ephesians chapter 5, of the 4, I love this because it is just very clear about God being in that family. He said, verse 22, wives, submit to your own husbands as, the phrase again, to the Lord. And I'm going to jump to the next verse. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church. It's about Christ and also about Christ giving himself for the church. And then the next verse in chapter 6 of Ephesians, verse 1, children, obey your parents in the Lord. And then the next verse in chapter 6, verse 4, and you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in training and admonition of the Lord. It seems very obvious to me that God is actively part of your family's story. And I would go further and say that God is not only redeeming individuals, but He is also redeeming and rescuing families. And the way He would do this is by, to those that are not Christians, by setting examples through a Christian household. You are the means by which other families will be saved, by which other families will be lifted up from their situations. You will be the setting stone or the standard that God will set. So Jesus said, Paul said, that for husbands to love their wives, the quality or the standard by which he must do this is through the love that Jesus showed through His church. So how did He do this? He did this through dying. Now, that's a pretty high standard of loving your wife. Sometimes in understanding Ephesians chapter 5 and other New Testament household codes is we get to this understanding that it's all about men. That men should be, feared and revered and up there because they're the men. But as we look closer to Ephesians chapter 5, it's about mutuality. That the husbands will love their wives and the wives will respect their husbands. What's the measurement? The measurement is Christ. Christ is the measurement. What kind of respect should wives give to their husbands? Like the respect that they should give to Christ. What kind of love should husbands show to their spouses, to their wives? Like the love that Jesus showed to His church. What kind of love was that? Dying for your spouse. Dying for your wife. Dying for the church. That's the kind of love that God wants us to show to our wives. Now, He continued in Ephesians chapter 6 about the kids. Because this is a whole family. He said, children, obey your parents in the Lord. And this is the promise of God that whenever you do this, your life will be prolonged. Obeying is something that is hard for young adults. Because they now have their own personality. They can now make their own decisions. But Jesus has shown how to obey. And how to obey is through humility. Sometimes, I remember this when I was still living with my parents, that I thought that I was smarter than my parents. And they told me to do this thing. And I thought, well, that doesn't make sense. You're not smart. And I thought I was smarter. But Jesus Christ has shown us how to obey. It's through humility. Sometimes, I think you will not agree with me. And if you're humble enough, you probably will agree. But I think sometimes we get into this mindset, the young adults will get into this mindset that they're smarter than their parents. But the reality is, parents are always smarter than the kids. Because they have gone through life. They have seen how it is. They know how to deal with money. They know how to deal with life. They know how to deal with struggles. They know how to deal with relationships. They have gone through this life, than you. And then in Ephesians chapter 6, again, verse 4, it said, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training admonition of the Lord. In the family, there's many things that goes on in the family. And one of these things that goes in the family is this relational thing. Because in the family, there are many roles. And so it's hard for us how to play that role. Because in the family, there are many roles. A husband is also a father. A father is also a mentor to his kids. A wife is not only a wife, she's also a mother. And she's not only a mother, but also a mentor to her daughter. And then the kid, the son, is not only a son, he's also a sibling. And so each individual in the family plays at least two kinds of roles. And Sometimes when you get into the shifting of roles, it's hard how to relate to one another. And so what we have is a provocation of some sort because of the relational shift from one role to another. Sometimes the husband does not realize that he needs to mentor the son. Sometimes the wife does not realize that she is the wife to her husband first before she is a mother. And so as we try to balance these roles, we have this provocation because of the struggles of, understanding these roles. And so, Paul said in Ephesians chapter 6, not to provoke. Whenever we shift these roles, we shift from one role to the next role, let's try not to provoke our kids. And we can say the same thing with our spouses. Let's try not to provoke. How do we do that? We do this by understanding that we are in a family that tries to be together. And that there will always be tensions. And that we will understand that as we progress towards change and towards betterment, that we can grow together through these tensions. And not to provoke our kids and our husbands and our wives. It's a better way of dealing with each other. It's far easy to provoke each other. It's hard to understand. But we can do this through understanding that Jesus has bought, this Christian family that we have has bought the whole family, and He wants us to be the standard for the whole community. I want us to close this with not only reviewing the points, but also with this verse from Paul in chapter 4, verse 2. He said, be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing one another in love. And I love this word from Paul, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2. He said, be patient. As the kids grow older, they will continue to find their identity. And sometimes they will think that they are, their older brother. Sometimes they think that they are their older sister. And as they continue to find their identity, they will struggle with many things. So parents are reminded by Paul to be patient. Be patient with that growth. Newlywed couples, there's a lot of stuff going on because you now have two individuals that have, that grew up separately and from different traditions and different backgrounds, and you put them together and will be, in the beginning, a chaotic relationship. Not all, but some. So Paul reminds those newlywed couples, be patient. Be patient to each other. And Paul also reminds these older couples that are, on their 60s or 70s and now have grandkids, and they have grandkids that are not growing the way that the grandparents would like them to grow. Paul reminds them this morning, be patient, because they are on the process of finding their identity. And to all of us who are here this morning, Paul is reminding us, be patient with each other, bearing one another in love. What does this look like? It looks like this. You make mistake, I forgive you. I'll extend my grace. This is family, and this is not only the biological family, but this is Christ's family. All of us will have different ideas, but this is the way God designed His family. You make mistakes, I forgive you, and I extend my grace. If there's anybody here that would like to become part of God's family, a beautiful family, beautiful dynamics of different backgrounds, beautiful dynamics of different attitudes, different characters, God, despite of it being crazy, God wants you to become part of this family. If you would stand up or talk to one of the elders or leaders sometime after this worship, that would be great.